This happened back in 2021. I, 27 and female, had just moved from Melbourne to rural Australia to live with my fiancé. At that time, he was still only my boyfriend. He was 29 and was on military posting at the army base. The town we moved to was pretty isolated, about 4 to 5 hours to reach any large city in each direction. It was still big enough though, with a few different suburbs surrounding the main area. Neither of us really knew the area at all before moving, and this led us to get a house in a pretty sketchy part of town. I'll try to explain the setup of the house first, as this will be important later. The house we moved into was quite old. It had huge glass windows everywhere, including the entirety of the front of the house. Because of this, you could easily see into the kitchen, living room, and one of the unused bedrooms without coming down the driveway. There was an old metal fence to the left of the house, which was about 1.5 meters tall. It led directly into the backyard. To the right of the house was a small path, hidden by an overgrowth of bush and plants from the front, with a locked gate the height of the house that led to the back semi-enclosed patio and back door. The path was right next to the kitchen window. You couldn't exactly see out when the light was on, but you could see in if you were outside. When coming in through the back door from the patio, you would walk through the laundry with an adjacent bathroom, into the kitchen with our bedroom off to the left, and a second one directly next to ours. My boyfriend was out doing military stuff for a week, so I had been home alone. It was summer during this time, and it was quite hot. The house had terrible AC, so I had been sleeping with the windows open, and even left the back door wide open on accident when falling asleep a few times. I've always felt safe in Australia, and have lived mostly alone ever since I was 18. I didn't really have an issue with it. It comes to Friday, my 5th day there alone, and I decided to walk into town and find something to do. The walk took about an hour each way, and when I finally got home, I was looking forward to doing nothing besides getting out of this damn heat. I spent most of the afternoon in the living room, playing PlayStation and watching TV. I had heard a few weird noises though, down the side of the house on the path next to the kitchen, leading to the patio. The guy who lived next to us had a workshop of some kind though, so I assumed it must have just been him tinkering around. I'm one of those people who lay in bed before they're ready to go to sleep. As I laid there, around 10 p.m. or so, I was doing my nightly scroll of Reddit. This really saved my ass, as I read a story that prompted me to get up out of bed and go close and lock the back door, which I'd almost forgotten to do. The back door had a normal lock, then a reinforced deadlock with a key screwed into the wall. 45 minutes or so later, still hearing the neighbor tinkering around occasionally, I decided I was ready to actually go to bed. I go and start turning off all the lights, including the back patio light and kitchen light. I lay down in bed and am finishing up my mindless scrolling when I hear the noises again. This time though, it was much louder. Still, it could just be that the guy was working in his workshop even harder, or maybe some kind of animal rustling things around. I was about to put down my phone and write it off, when suddenly, I heard a loud bang at my back door. I instantly felt like everything was going in slow motion. I just knew someone was kicking the back door in. I thought to myself, this cannot be happening. Then came another bang, and another. It was all so loud, and it felt like the house itself was shaking. I could hear multiple points of glass shattering, and the banging continuing. This went on for what felt like an eternity, but was only a few minutes. In my panic, after the second or third bang, thinking I could scare them off by pretending a man was here, I yelled out in the deepest voice I could, then slammed my bedroom door closed. Obviously, that didn't really work. I locked it and called 000, then pushed my bed up against the door. The banging was still going on, even as I called the police. Just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. There was nowhere else to hide, so I was crouched down in the corner of the room near my bed. While on the phone with police, I could hear someone starting to kick in the bedroom door as well. I was screaming at this point. I don't even remember what I was saying to the operator, or what they were saying to me. I remember praying the police arrived before these people got inside my room. I could hear sirens. The banging on the bedroom door stopped immediately, and I saw torches shining into the bedroom window. Because I was so scared, I couldn't really comprehend what the operator was saying to me. I had no idea if those torchlights were whoever had just kicked in my back door and bedroom door, or if it was the police finally arriving. I don't remember how I realized this, but it turned out it was the police outside. The next thing I remember, I was in the kitchen surrounded by 10 officers, crying and trying to explain what had happened. I was so inconsolable that the police had to use my boyfriend's army photos on the fridge to get his details to call the duty officer to allow him to come home. Once I calmed down a bit and my boyfriend got back, I saw the back gate to the patio was completely broken. The bedroom door was cracked and the back door had been thrown off its hinges with the deadlock completely ripped out of the wall. The laundry window had been smashed in as well. There were 2 sets of clear footprints on the door from where they had kicked the door in. I checked my phone and called 000 at 12:04 a.m. and had been on the phone for less than 5 minutes. What I think happened is that they must have followed me back from my walk. They could easily see from the road that I was alone and had been watching me on the path next to the kitchen for the evening. The noises I thought were the neighbor tinkering must have been them, and once I turned the lights off, they finally made their move. I don't think they anticipated the back door would be so hard to break down though, which is why they smashed the laundry room window. They couldn't unlock the deadbolt without the key though, so I guess they broke it down somehow. Luckily, that extra time saved me from whatever they were trying to do. The guys weren't ever caught, and we ended up moving house within the next few weeks. My boyfriend and I even ended up breaking up, as he was regularly out on duty and I couldn't stand to be home at night anymore. I would panic, cry, and not sleep until the sun would come up, and it put too much strain on the relationship. It wasn't until later that I realized I was experiencing PTSD, and after I worked through it, we got back together. I now live back in my home city in an apartment building that has 24/7 security, 1 billion cameras, and I got 2 dogs as well. In 2018, I lived with my partner and my German Shepherd in the Humboldt Park neighborhood of Chicago. I was 33 years old, and our apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up unit. Very typical low-budget Chicago rental in a changing neighborhood. The layout of our building is going to matter in this story. Our building had a total of 12 units. Mine and the 3 below me had a shared front entrance, and the other 8 units were through a different one. All 12 apartments had connected back porches and stairs that shared a walkway to a rear gate, which led out to an open alley. From the front stairwell, there were windows on each landing to the back porches, so you could see the back door of my apartment when standing at the front door through that window. We had pretty good relations with our neighbors, especially those that lived directly below us and shared our front door. And that's the thing that saved all 3 of us, my partner, my dog, and me. My partner was in a touring band at the time and would leave for weekends or weeks at a time. It was a scary thing for me because I was SA'd and stalked by an ex in my teens and 20s. I was always worried something would tip him off and he'd start coming after me again. A little less than a month before a 2-week tour my partner had scheduled, I received a creepy message on Facebook from that stalker from yet another new account. It was about a week after my car had been broken into. The glove box had been emptied and things were thrown around, but the only thing that had been taken was a bag of dog treats. I even had $20 in the compartment between the seats, and they left the money alone. I was on high alert at this point, and very scared about the time I'd be alone during this tour. My partner was kind of irritated with me and the situation, and felt it was too last minute to cancel, especially over what amounted to a bad feeling and a few isolated things that weren't even direct threats. Truthfully, car break-ins are very, very common in Chicago anyway. It happened to me about 15 times. The police usually do reports over the phone and don't even come to the scene. That's how common it is. What I found the most strange, though, was that the thief didn't take the money. There was a homeless man who had started camping on the boulevard nearby recently, so I didn't think it could have been him. My partner left for his tour, and I set up some cameras and bought door braces for my front and back doors. I became completely nocturnal, unable to sleep at night. My poor dog developed diarrhea around this time. I thought maybe because she was picking up on my stress level. That meant I was taking her down all 4 flights of stairs for her to go 6 or 7 times a night. I began to have the distinct prickly crawling sensation of being watched whenever I would take her out. I couldn't tell where that person was though, or even if it was my own fear and paranoia. Her issues lasted an unusually long time too, almost a week or so. I was going in and out of the main door a lot, feeling very scared. At that point, I noticed that some of my neighbors didn't always pull the door all the way closed, so the lock would engage. I mentioned it to my downstairs neighbor one day, including that I was extra careful because of the stalker. He was supportive and said he'd mention it to everyone else when he saw them. I noticed the door was locked more frequently after that. My partner came home at about 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. At 8:30 earlier that morning, my first-floor neighbor's place was burglarized. He was a metalhead dude who collected instruments, sold weed and psychedelics, and lived all alone. I guess he went out for breakfast and forgot to lock his door while he was gone. Someone had come in, eaten the leftovers in his fridge, took a coat and pair of boots, took his college diploma as well, and left pretty much everything else. They left all the expensive musical instruments and mixing equipment, left the drugs as well. The only other thing they took were a set of keys. The keys were to the first-floor apartment and a master key for the front door and back gate. The neighbors ran into each other right after the break-in, and the second-floor one said to go tell me because I had a stalker. So that's what he did. He let me know what had happened. My partner had just gotten home from his tour when he knocked at the front door. I just about jumped out of my skin. I looked through the peephole and recognized him. The 3 of us stood in the stairs at my front door while he told us about the break-in. We jabber-jawed for a while, about 15 to 20 minutes I'd say. While we were in the middle of talking, we heard the front door open and close below us. We didn't really think that much about it. Then though, we saw a man climbing up my back porch steps to my back door through the window. There was no other apartment he would have been going to. He had to walk past all 11 more accessible ones on his way to mine. I could see he was not my stalker, and I did not recognize him either, but his image is still burned into my mind. He was wearing flashy black shoes, the ones stolen from downstairs, and had a big black coat, which was oversized and hanging off his shoulders. We locked eyes through the window, and he froze halfway up the stairs to my back porch. He slowly took out a cell phone and called someone as he turned around halfway up the steps. He walked back down the stairs extremely stiffly, like he was pretending to be nonchalant, then bolted into a sprint as soon as he hit the porch below ours. My neighbor ran downstairs and dialed 911. My partner and I ran through the apartment to the back porch and saw a sedan and a windowless van pull out of the sketchy building 2 doors down. Both cars floored it down the alley. We didn't get the plates. The cops said it wouldn't have mattered though. There wasn't any crime committed and nothing concrete to justify stopping them. They very condescendingly explained this to me as they took my statement later. My neighbor is the one who actually made the call and has the police report. My partner and I were just considered witnesses. For a long time though, the thing that scared me the most was a tool my neighbor found when he went running downstairs. It was a 2x4 piece of wood, cut to about 2 feet. The last end of it had been made into a handle of some sorts. It almost looked like a paddle, and for a long time I couldn't figure out what it was supposed to be. Eventually though, we figured out it was a ram for the door. When I looked at my door afterward, it looked like the frame had been broken. It seemed like they used their master key in order to place their ram on my door, then had somebody wait at the back porch to catch me if I tried to run out that way. The other person went to the front entrance since they only had the one key. When we caught them before they could catch us unawares, it seemed they aborted the plan. I suspect they'd been watching me, especially while I was taking out my dog, and figured I was alone. It was pure coincidence my partner arrived home just 30 minutes before all of this. I feel we all could have been horribly injured or worse had we been trapped inside and had they gotten the jump on us. Nothing else ever came of it. My landlord refused to change the locks, but he did agree to let us out of our lease at least. I moved out of Chicago and have added a younger dog I'm training to do some bite work. My house is surrounded by cameras and floodlights now. It's been about 10 years since this happened, but I still remember things pretty clearly. I should note that this is told from my perspective, and I wish I could get my mother's on it as well. Unfortunately, she doesn't remember the events as well as I do. For context, I live in a mid-sized city in the southern United States, where the main thing to do at the time was to go to the mall. Sure, we had a movie theater and a couple of bowling alleys, but besides that, there wasn't really much to do. My mom worked at a department store located in the mall, and having nothing better to do, I would regularly go and visit and sit in the break room while she worked. It gave me a reason to get out of the house, and if I wanted to, I was allowed to walk around the mall or get something to snack on in the food court. Honestly though, I was fairly shy back then, so I preferred to just stay in the break room and play video games on my 3DS. My mom's coworkers were very sweet to me and frequently popped in to say hello or check in on me during downtime. If I was lucky enough to go with my mom on weekends, I could usually convince my mom to pick up my friend. We were actually dating, but since we were both girls, I didn't want anyone to find out, and she'd come along with us. Going to the mall meant I was free from doing chores at home, and it was a cheap way to sneak in a secret date every now and then. My girlfriend, though, never really liked staying in the break room with me. She always wanted to walk around the mall instead. I should note that she really enjoyed taking walks, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to want to do so at the mall as well. I just didn't like walking as much as she did. I tried to weasel my way out of it whenever I could. I could usually convince her to just walk over to a nearby store and look around or grab something from the food court rather than going all around the area. I noticed pretty quickly, though, that she wasn't really trying to get me to walk around. She actually seemed to just not want to be in the break room. My girlfriend is much more perceptive to things than I was, and I assumed she just didn't like the ambiance for some reason. For a little while, I just let it go, but eventually I got frustrated and I asked directly what was really bothering her about this break room. I thought she was going to tell me it was too cramped or the lights randomly cutting off made her uneasy, things that bothered me about it too, but no. She told me that she could hear things in the ceiling, like someone had been walking around up there. I had learned from my mother that there was in fact a room up in the ceiling, but it wasn't for walking around in, it was for maintenance. Most of the stuff in there was wiring and insulation. Technically, someone could go up there. I told my girlfriend this and said it was likely an employee just trying to fix things. She said it was fine, but she didn't really like it and still preferred walking around or sitting in the food court. I understood her discomfort and wanted to help, so I agreed. We had a really good relationship in the sense of communication, and though I did get a bit frustrated, I didn't really mind too much if it made her more comfortable. Later that day, I mentioned what my girlfriend had told me and asked what they were fixing in the ceiling to my mom. My mom looked very distressed though and said they hadn't been fixing anything that day. She wanted me to see something though. She took me into the receiving room of the department store, which was a room off in the back filled with boxes and random junk. The layout of this room though was sort of an L shape. Only one part was used for receiving. The other part was a way up into the ceiling. I should clarify for this next part that to get into the ceiling, the store would have to call for the mall's maintenance team. They didn't have a ladder or anything on hand to climb in there, as it would have been a safety hazard to leave around. The only thing this particular area had was the hatch that led to the ceiling. That was it. Needless to say, I was horrified to see what appeared to be gash marks leading up the wall to the hatch. I still remember the way they looked. Brown gashes that had been dug into the concrete wall of the receiving room. I asked my mom if this was a prank, but she told me that wasn't even the first time it had happened. She had no way of knowing I would even ask about it. According to her, these weird gashes would show up several times over the course of many months. Each time, the store would call the mall's security and maintenance teams, who would clean the wall up and go into the ceiling to investigate. They never found anything with their searches though, and they eventually gave up looking altogether. The only explanation they could find was that it was likely a homeless individual who had somehow made their way into the ceiling and somehow avoided everyone during all the searches. I stopped staying at the mall with my mom after that, and anytime I wanted my girlfriend to come over, we found somewhere else to go during the day. I didn't really feel safe going to the break room after that. I know nothing had technically happened up until that point, but I didn't want to risk hanging around with some random person skulking about in the ceiling. First of all, I'm sorry if my English is not the best, but I'm from Italy and I learned all on my own. This is my first time writing something out. I want to share this strange episode from my childhood. I was around 9 or 10 years old and used to go to school all on my own. It was just a short walk. It wasn't that far, only about 10 minutes every day. I went the same way every time. It was the shortest way, but it was also the most isolated. I was walking alone as I always did when I noticed a police car coming up on my left. There was a middle-aged man inside, obviously a policeman. He slowed down and started talking to me. "Hey kid, are you going to school?" I said yes, and he kept driving next to me. He asked if I wanted to hop into his car so he could take me to school faster. I said no, and that my mom had always told me not to talk with strangers. "Oh, I'm not a stranger. I'm a policeman. You can trust me." I thanked him for the offer, but told him it wasn't really a problem. The school wasn't that far away now. He insisted though. He sped up a bit and got right in front of me, then opened the car door. "Come on, it'll be fun to take a ride in the police car. It's almost every child's dream." I said once again for the man to leave me alone. He kept the car door open, staring at me. I started to walk a little faster and went down a side street. As soon as I did so, I started to run, to the point where I could no longer even see the car behind me. I was shocked from the events. I was a very young person. You know, that policeman had a very weird smile when I think back on it. Very disturbing, very unnatural. Since that day, I never took that way again. and my mom started to walk with me, at least for a while in the mornings to school. I never figured out what the man wanted, or if he had good or bad intentions, taking advantage of the fact he was a policeman so kids would trust him more easily. I'm happy though that I didn't have to discover what was on his mind. Who knows what may have happened to me? This happened to my dad 10 years ago. Nothing too crazy. I was relatively young at the time, so it really creeped me out. We lived in a smallish city in a residential neighborhood, about 20 minutes from downtown. It was summer and my dad was up late writing, around 3 a.m. or so. As he looked out the window, he could see a man and a woman, anywhere from 25 to 30 years old, walking down the street. They walked right up our driveway and right to our front door, possibly because they saw a light on inside. They knocked loudly on the door. My dad was already suspicious of what these two wanted. He decided not to open the door. Our door had a large glass window on it, and if you spoke loudly enough, you could hear someone on the other side. My dad asked them what they wanted, and they asked to come inside. My dad, of course, refused, but the couple repeatedly asked if he could call them a cab then. My dad said okay to this. As soon as he did, the couple again asked if they could come inside. My dad said no and told them to wait at the end of the driveway. My dad then turned away from the door and shut all the lights off in the house. He never did get the chance to call a cab though. As he went to the window to watch the couple, they walked back to the end of the driveway, appeared to have a long conversation, and then walked back down the road, out of sight and into the darkness. I can understand someone showing up to ask for a cab if you live near a bar or a restaurant or something, but like I said, we were 20 minutes away from any of that stuff. Our neighborhood was mostly young families, and it was a very safe area. We did have a few incidents of people going to our cars at night if we left them unlocked, but that was it really. I was asleep the whole time this was happening. When my dad recounted the tale in the morning, it definitely spooked me. Afterwards, if I woke up in the middle of the night, I would have a difficult time getting back to sleep. My neighbors ended up having a break-in a few months after this incident, so we decided to get an alarm system for the house. It definitely helps me sleep at night.